Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome to the High and Mighty, the marijuana podcast hosted by Cy and Emily. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of cannabis and discuss everything from the latest industry news and trends to the potential health benefits and risks of marijuana use. Whether you're a seasoned cannabis enthusiast or new to the world of weed, you'll find something to enjoy on our show. So sit back, relax, and let's get high on knowledge together. What do you think?
Well, I like the name High and Mighty, but who's high and who's mighty?
Yeah, that's right. I guess we need to determine that. So yeah, this weekend I was messing around with this OpenAI Chat GPT. Did you see all these headlines about it, or did you get a chance to play with it?
Of course. No,
Yeah.
I haven't played with it yet because I've been
You're
a little busy.
working.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
but I have seen it.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's pretty impressive what it can do. So I said, it's got a chat prompt, right? And I said, write an intro for a marijuana podcast hosted by Cy and Emily, and out comes the High and Mighty. So I could probably say write a whole podcast transcript, and it would probably do the whole thing for us. So pretty soon we just need to get our voices recorded, and then we don't even have to do this in person anymore. We'll just let the robots do it.
And that would be very sad because we would go back into our little isolated holes like we were during the pandemic, which is the opposite of the point of this. But, robots are here to stay in San Francisco. Apparently, we're going to have robots that can shoot people. Feels right.
Yikes.
Yeah. I don't know.
Not related to the delivery robots, hopefully, but like police robots.
Yeah, they deliver your food and then shoot you.
And shoot you.
Yeah, also.
Try and rob them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I have had 3 bizarre kind of events occur around and adjacent and to me in San Francisco in the past few weeks. So I'm getting pretty fed up with the lack of criminal justice focus here. But robots with guns is not where I think the solution lies.
Yeah, that's a little too RoboCop for me, but
same. And I haven't even seen it.
We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was just a fun toy. It knows a lot about cannabis. I asked it to name a new strain of marijuana. It came up with Serendipity, known for its uplifting and euphoric effects. So I'm sure we'll see that one on the market soon. I asked it to review a cannabis strain and did that. A strain called Dizzy Spell that's not for the faint of heart, as it delivers a powerful high that can leave you feeling dizzy and disoriented. So might want to stay away from that one.
Not for the faint of heart. Got it. Thank you, little robot, for your cute jokes on the review of Dizzy Spell.
I know. I kind of chalk it up to like talking to a parrot. It sounds like a human, but it's just not there yet. But anyways, I encourage everyone to check it out. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's a pretty fun little toy, but I don't want to talk about AI too much this podcast. I want to talk about cannabis on the High and Mighty. So particularly around the federal side. So I think it's a big week. It was a big week last week. It looks like it might be a big week this week. Yeah. And let's start with the Medical Marijuana and Cannabidiol Research Expansion Act, which was the legislation that came through where it'll enable researchers to be able to study the plant in a better way. Calls on the federal government to look into the potential therapeutic benefits of marijuana. And what's really exciting to me is that it can help with the rescheduling conversation, right? I mean,
yes,
it will take time, as everyone's very familiar with, medical studies take a lot of time and a lot of money. But, hopefully it does help and just continues to normalize. So this actually got a signature from Biden. So it's like a real thing. And is this the first time at the federal level the president has signed something related to marijuana reform directly?
Yes, except for when it was going in the other direction and Nixon was putting us in a box. But and everybody else, all the steps that were signed into law that put this at a Schedule 1 and where it lives today. But I think what you're saying is really important because the fact that Biden signed this suggests that he thinks there is merit to research, which suggests that there's something beneficial about cannabis to explore, which by just that very fact means that it shouldn't live in the Schedule 1 because Schedule 1 means there's no benefit to this. And we all know that's just not true. But, and in fact, I just saw a study that did come out, and to your point, it's all been done kind of ex the US. But there was an interesting study around opiate use of cancer patients and the reduction of the need for opiates for cancer patients, which is very important to me. As part of the reason I got into this is regarding, my parents' health, and if they'd only had access to it, even just purely from a palliative care standpoint, that would have meant a lot to my family. But this is where we are today. And so I'm happy to see some progress around this. I'm happy to see Biden, who, frankly, for almost the entire tenure of his presidency and his administration has been kind of actively negative towards the industry and people who consume or choose to consume or even invest in cannabis. So I think this is a little bit of a step forward. And I think the timing then of the response of the Secretary of Health and Human Services then coming forward and making statements a couple of days in a row around this, which I think is really important.
Yeah. What were those statements? He was basically saying that they are looking at it and they're active in this effort.
Yep. Yeah, that they're digging in on it. And it's funny, Tom Angell from Marijuana Moment pointed out in a tweet that was Xavier Becerra, I think, tweeted regarding making comments about this twice at 4:20 p.m. Very precise timing on the release of these tweets. And it's so funny because I feel like we joke around, like sometimes when we're recording the podcast, I'll be like, it's 4:20, dude. But, I think that the rest of it, we're generally unfazed by the notion of 4:20 on the mark every day because
you're living
in
420 every day.
We're living it. And but for people outside the industry, like I feel like Chuck Schumer's like, oh, I'm gonna release this on 4:20. And like it's like a bit of like a nerdy outsider take on what's cool around cannabis. But hey, I'll take it. Like if you want to fanboy out and like worship 4:20, like go right ahead.
That is a funny thought. Yeah. Schumer in like a 4:20 t-shirt under his coat, his sport coat or something, and when they finally do get something, I could see him pulling something like that.
But yeah, just like ripping it off. Yeah. Swing it like a helicopter.
I'm just like you guys.
Yeah. Look, see, me too. I'm in it.
And the Department of Justice too, didn't they talk about something this week related to the rescheduling? I think they both I don't know, are looking at this, right? It's not just the Health and Human Services that's going into this.
Yeah, the DOJ. Yeah, they apparently have weighed in on the safe banking language weeks ago. And so then some of that came forth and people were like, oh no, the DOJ. And I was remembering that amazing scene in Blazing Saddles when they're like, we've got to protect our phony baloney jobs, gentlemen, harumph. And it's like, I just picture all these agencies like weighing in because they've benefited from kind of pursuing the war on drugs and having control over people through the structure around the war on drugs. And but I think actually the DOJ's line of commentary was fairly benign and had been factored into where the safe language that has been getting around a little bit, it lives today. So it's not as scary as people think. But was there something else around the DOJ that you were thinking?
Maybe not. Or maybe it was in the director of Health and Human Services, that Xavier Becerra, that mentioned something about it. I feel like I saw something, but if you didn't notice, maybe I'm just making it up. But I know that it's partly, it's not just one thing. Originally, I thought it was just the HHS that was going to drive this, but I think that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen here, and hopefully all this comes in and there's a little bit of studying, and they're like, okay, obviously it's not one, and then it falls down that list, and hopefully completely off the list, but we shall see.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because Joe Rogan the other day, I don't listen too much to the podcast because I don't have that much time. But he was like, look, if you take too much Advil, you can die. And I'm like, that's it's just like a very basic thing that lives in almost everybody's cupboards, right? Or an Advil equivalency of ibuprofen. And then I think about where cannabis is scheduled, and like, you could eat a field of cannabis and, it's just not going to shut down your brainstem. It's not going to turn off the body or the heart or the lungs. And, you may have a bit of a freak out and maybe make some bad decisions. But I think, it's just ridiculous that it's been living where it's living. And we all know this. So these are all great signals. And I think that a lot of us have had our hearts set on safe happening within, well, no, I think I'd say many of us started 2022 without even a hope or a prayer that that this would be a year we'd see safe, but it appears it's materializing. But I think we can't forget the fact that there is this other piece of it, which if it does get rescheduled, but like to a 3, which is, Brady Cobb says that's where he thinks it lands. Maybe it gets descheduled. Maybe it gets a new schedule because it is quite a unique substance that hasn't been really, it doesn't really have parity with any of the other stuff that exists on the schedule.
I believe it's going to end up on schedule 420.
Ah!
Oh. So,
You're killing me, Si.
so schedule 3, what's on schedule 3? I'm trying to do a little research. Schedule 2 includes some nasty things in
Fentanyl
here.
is on 2. Bad news
2
bears.
is like, wow.
Danger zone.
Yeah, right. It really is. Really is.
That's the highway to the danger zone. But
no kidding.
Yeah, cannabis is not.
On schedule 3, it's a big list here that I'm finding on.
Show us what are some highlights, Si?
Well, I can't pronounce any of them because they're all like medical pharma deals. I don't even recognize any of these. I'm just have I
been saying cannabidiol wrong this entire time? Because you said it differently.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. I don't think anybody knows.
All right, we digress. What else is going on at the federal level? I think there's something shaking up there.
Yeah, well, besides the future rescheduling here, SAFE. So something we talk about a lot, and maybe by the time this recording goes out, there'll be some more concrete news on where it's going to end up. But I think this week, it's over the weekend. I guess the tail end of last week, it was a lot of the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Administration.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
it's not defense.
It's a defense bill.
It's defense spending.
Right?
Yep.
Yes, defense spending, and they're talking about throwing SAFE on there, and SAFE plus a new one, which, forgive me, I wasn't familiar with, but it's what is it? The new acronym related to the Second Amendment. That's not
hope.
Yeah,
SAFE plus hope plus. Where did we net out on that? Yeah, well, but it's around.
It's around.
Sorry, go ahead. The guns.
Exactly, which is crazy but interesting. But I could see how it might work. But anyways, they're trying to put it into this NDAA, which is just interesting because it's a defense act and defense funding. I don't know, not a great look as how it gets in, but it's not that cannabis is the only thing. I think a lot of things get thrown onto this because it's like a must-pass deal. But if it wasn't, if it doesn't get on there, there's rumors about some sort of omnibus legislation that'll come out in this lame duck session. So there's a chance. But I think the moral here is that we're, continuing to be, so close or never been closer, it's kind of the message. But I mean, literally, I don't think it can get much closer than where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think that, I think this is the real setting of the stage. And I am really hopeful that it gets included in the spending bill around defense, because those things tend to get passed. I think, was it 60 years that was the last time they didn't get a defense bill done before the session ended and shut down the government around this? I mean, it's I think it would be a very bad look, and especially given the instability of the global climate right now with everything going on with Korea, China, Russia. I think a lot of folks aren't even paying attention to some of the things happening in Latin America. It's a time, and so it's not a time for us to be kind of letting the side down, as they say in Great Britain, around our spending on defense. And so I'm really hopeful that we get this included. It would be nice. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people have different reasons for why they want SAFE passed. And I think, on the pod, we've interviewed entrepreneurs who've experienced prejudice around banking support for their business. Suzanne Nicholson being one of them. Mm-hmm. She articulated very well, and it really hit me in the heart about what she's gone through to try to, achieve a banking relationship to just support her single dispensary in New Jersey. And I think it's everything from that all the way through to companies like yours, Sai, where you have an ancillary technology platform and the cost of doing business is higher because of the structural components that would actually be meaningful from safe, but which are not that many, and then also the signal around what it means to not have safe. So just a little bit of history. We haven't had banking guidance since January 4th, 2018, when Jeff Sessions rescinded the Cole memo. And along with that came a lot of changes. And so we've been kind of just doing this by, belts and suspenders, pulling this industry along, and a little bit by local and smaller banks that have been willing to step up to participate. And then you have private lending going on. But these things really do impact everything from single retailers to ancillary technology platforms to investment funds and firms like mine, all the way up to the public companies. So I don't know. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. From my kind of understanding of it, I don't think it's going to be this revolutionary thing that changes. It's not like a overnight, like the whole world is different. I think that it will unlock a lot of things that have been pretty well blocked. Like I was thinking about the Visa MasterCard thing, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you don't want to take all this cash. We spend a lot on credit cards. Does this like remove any friction? And it looks like they've said that, because it's still federally illegal, they're still not that interested.
Right.
But, now with the banking piece, you take that away and it just kind of includes some optionality there, right? So maybe we could see something, but from what in my limited research, they said, no, we wouldn't do it because it's still federally illegal. It's still Schedule 1, right? So, it doesn't mean tomorrow, yeah, you can walk into a dispensary and say, okay, do you take Visa? But there's a better chance for it, right? The banking is so limited, and like in my experience, I mean, we've lost banks as a company,
Yep.
multiple times. We've and just on like policy changes, not like a
Mm-hmm.
misleading, like, oh, we're not this, we're that, but like, literally where the bank says, okay, we're actually going to change our policy. And if you take, upwards of 70% of your revenue, even if as a non-plant touching company, then we can't bank you because they were not ready for, the perceived liability that they would have with the federal government. So that's happened ages ago. With Leafly, we had employees that lost banks, which is crazy. So just as an employee, right, one day they're like, well, where's your paycheck come from? Sorry, you're out. I think it was like Chase or something
Yeah.
at the time, maybe B of A.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just crazy, right? Can you imagine that? Tomorrow you get an email from your bank like, sorry, can't bank here. It's quite disruptive. Like when we've lost banks as a company, it's surprising how intertwined it all is. Because especially with all the online payments and everything that you're running, like to have to lose that is challenging. So that goes away, right? So the people having to deal with that all the time, that'll go away. And then new banks coming in, banks valuing the opportunity. There are banks that support the industry, but they're really less risk averse, I guess. So that they're willing to take the risk on this whole thing. But I think that risk goes away in a big way. So you're probably going to see more banks coming in. I'm no banker, and so I'm not really sure, how all this stuff works. And I know like, heavy cash businesses have a lot of restrictions because of things like laundering and so on. And if banks are
Mm-hmm.
still forced to take cash, I could see larger banks still saying, well, this is a hard thing for us, right? And we've got to build a lot of structure around this to support it. Just like if you're any cash heavy business, I think they
Mm-hmm.
have all sorts of reporting requirements that are specific. And it's like, that's a challenge. But maybe if, my bank, and I can do a debit transaction, no problem. And it's not this like tricky, cashless ATM that are apparently all getting kind of turned off
Shut
right
down.
now. Yeah. On
Mm-hmm.
the eve here of safe banking, that stuff can happen because that network is, the ACH network or whatever. That's maybe not ACH for debit, but the debit networks are more tied to banks. Maybe that'll get easier, and then you can pay more easily with debit. Or with ACH without any real risk. Again, I'm not that close to it, but I just think about it like kind of greasing the wheels a little bit. Like the stuff that's just stupid and challenging for our industry gets a little easier. And then the easier it gets, maybe then the bigger things can start to happen, right? Maybe we'll see the exchanges start to say, okay, well, like Visa and MasterCard could say, well, we could do this because we have this air cover and the money looks good and it's worth the risk. Where the banks now that are doing it did that calculus, right, and said, okay, it's legal in our state. We're a state credit union or whatever we are. We'll take that risk. I think that this just creates more room to take that risk. And so, we'll see. And I could be wrong. I mean, everything could flip overnight. It could be amazing. But I think what I'm excited about is that it's legislation at the federal level, and it's been exhausting when it hasn't happened for so long. And, here we are finally seeing some stuff. And I think it's just the beginning, and it'll open it all up over, the months and the years going forward.
Yeah, and I think about, and I was glad you mentioned what's going on with the cashless ATMs at the doors, because it's turning these businesses back to a heavier cash transaction base, which is harder to track, harder to pay taxes on. It's all harder. And even here, in California, I have this cart loaded up for delivery from Spark. They're having a deal on Wonder, and I'm loading up because I'm still trying to have the nights where I'm not drinking, and then I do enjoy having a Wonder while I'm cooking. And if they're having a 30% off, I'm going to grab as much as I can, basically. But then San Francisco again, my ATM has been smashed. So Chase closed my ATM. So now I got to walk across the panhandle. So I went. Anyway, the long story short is, I've had a significant cart that's been waiting to get checked out for 3 days from Spark. And I feel like for them as a business, that stinks, because there should just be a higher velocity, less friction to close. And we know this is real at every point of retail experience, way beyond cannabis, is that friction to close is really difficult for businesses. And so I think that little things like that could be improved, if you can just use a debit card at the point of sale or whatever it is, depending on how you're getting your product, I think it's critically important. And I don't know, these are small asks, and in the backdrop of the lack of oversight that's gone on other industries, I'm surprised we're still here. But hopefully this will get done in the lame duck session so we can stop talking about it.
I know. That's half
I'd
of
be
it. We are
happy.
talking about it all the
Yeah.
time, but it will be nice to not talk about it. We'll talk about the next thing, the next big item.
You know
Well, I
what it
just
means
asked
too? Yeah. Oh, so go ahead.
what is it? What does it mean?
Well, it means too, I also know, because I talk to a wide base of investors that are traditional VCs, private equity firms, all kinds of individuals that are outside of the industry who have been watching it and watching it carefully for a long time. And for some reason, even though, again, structurally, it doesn't really change that much in terms of participation in the industry, but it's the signal that a lot of these groups have designated as thumbs up, we can start participating in the industry. And you're a private company, you've been in cannabis, and you've probably gotten tired of talking with Poseidon about, we don't know where the next round of capital comes from, in these private rounds of investment, because it's not like what we've seen in Silicon Valley, where there's, a huge cohort of funds that are just seed stage, huge cohort at A, huge cohort at B, and so on and so forth, leading you all the way to your exit. And so I think if we can get more capital to participate in this industry, then founders like you can think more about driving to innovation, maybe making acquisitions. There's a lot of things that could go on if we had a different capital flow into the sector. And I think SAFE is the green light to start participating. It's really important.
It really is important, and that's a good way to put it. It's the green light for a lot of people to kind of give it a second look, and then followed up hopefully by a rescheduling event where it gets to Schedule 3 or not scheduled, and momentum continues. I just asked our friend at ChatGPT, when will cannabis be federally legalized? And it says the decision to legalize marijuana is ultimately up to the federal government, fair, and it will likely depend on a variety of factors, including public opinion, which is
We
pointing
have.
in the right, yeah, exactly. The results of scientific studies, which have been really hard, but now they're not, right? So that's another piece that's coming down, and the potential impact on public health and safety, which we also have a lot of data on that already. So
Net
right around the
positive.
corner. So you got to trust the AI here.
That robot's speaking the truth. It's a very
Yeah.
vague truth. But
It's very vague.
it's a fair outline of what needs to happen for the outcome that we'd like to see. Oh, the one thing the robot forgot is that politicians have different motives than to serve their bosses, which are the constituents, which are you and me. But
it's got a lot to learn.
Yeah, if it only understood that public opinion and the people who work for the public opinion, there's a big delta there, on motivation. We'll just know, like I said, we'll know once Nancy Pelosi starts buying the stocks.
It's the best signal there is.
When the politicians start front running the institutions.
Just start a website, the Pelosi cannabis stock tracker. And has she bought a stock yet today? And just refresh it daily.
Just hit, refresh.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.